Welcome to the Happiness Contribution Show with me, your happy host, Rosaria Cirillo. On the show, we talk about the various roles happiness plays in our individual lives and in business, and about the benefits that being happy brings. And we share knowledge and practices about what contributes to our happiness. Join me and my guests on this happiness journey together and get involved by visiting our website at happinesscontribution.com. Welcome, good morning. This is your host, Rosaria Cirillo, Italian, living in the Netherlands for 21 years with my Dutch husband and 2 boys. I spent over 20 years in customer experience role, and in the last few years, I focus much more on happiness and what contributed to our happiness, and how can we bring more happiness into organizations for customers, employees, and society overall. And I evangelize the role of the science of happiness and well-being in business and life, believing that the future of CX is HCX. And the happiness contribution way is my way to share part of this knowledge with you all. And today I have, as usual, a very special guest that I actually met in 2019 already during a design thinking conference where I was giving a workshop on how to use the science of happiness. And then later on, he published, I'm going to give you a bit of spoiler, he published this fantastic book. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you our guest today, Alwin. Welcome.
Hi, hey Rosie.
Ahoy, I should say properly.
Ahoy! Ahoy, yes.
Ahoy.
Thank you for having me on your show.
You're welcome. So I won't say much about Alwin other than say that he's the author of this fantastic book, trainer, speaker, and captains of facilitation. And we'll let Alwin tell
captains
us
of leadership, yes.
Captains of leadership. And yeah, without any further ado, Alwin, tell us, who is Alwin?
Who is Alwin? Yeah, wow. So that's immediately a big question. Alwin, just like anybody else, has all kinds of different aspects to him. And one is I love writing. So I'm not sure if I can call myself an author, but there's a book, so I guess I can. I think at one aspect, I'm a writer. At the other part, I'm also a trainer. So I train a lot of people in the skill of facilitation. And then besides that, I am also a father. I'm a father of 2 wonderful sons with loads of energy bouncing off the wall as they grow older. But they're so important to me. So my 2 kids, Magnus and Svante. And then I'm also a husband to Annelies, the love of my life already for 23 years. So let's see. So I've got a writer, a trainer. I also advise companies on co-creation. So I might be called an advisor, or I don't know. I'm not sure if I like that word a lot, but something like a consultant or support. What other aspect is there? I think I summed up the main ones, Rosie. Yeah.
Cool. And then, as we are on the Happiness Contribution Show, what is your definition of happiness?
That again is a pretty tough question, but I was expecting this one. So, well, if I look at my life, because I think I can only talk from my experience, because I'm not so sure if everybody experiences happiness in the same way. So I can't give an answer that I think can apply to everybody. But if I would just reflect upon my life, then I think I'd make a distinction between short-term or immediate happiness and more of a long-term sustaining happiness. And if I look at that short-term or immediate happiness, it's those typical moments when you might get a rush of dopamine, or you might get some endorphins, or the good stuff, like an anandamide, some lateral thinking, some creativeness. So I'm happy when, for example, I took a run in nature. And I got some of that stuff happening in my some of those biochemicals in my body. I'm happy when I've done a really nice, good meditation. So because then also there's it's not only being in the zone, but also a lot of biochemicals happen in your body because of that, and gives you a feeling of happiness. Not saying that happiness is those biochemicals, but it does generate a nice feeling of happiness. So I'm happy when I'm doing really great creative work. So, for example, when I'm writing and I see that ideas start flowing out of nowhere, that is very satisfying. That is a zone I'm looking for often when I do creative work, and that makes me happy. I am happy when I get compliments like everybody. I think that's
Mhm.
also a bit of dopamine going on in my brain and my body. So when people like the stuff I'm doing, or when I can make them happy and they tell me or they show me, that gives me happiness. I am happy in a proud way when I see my kids do certain things. I'm happy when I can be a good partner or a good friend to somebody. So those are moments of happiness that come up in my life, and I'm sure that everybody has some kind of moments that might be similar, but just in their context. Or and then um, happiness in a sustainable way. That's a completely other thing. So I also think those moments of happiness are often followed by moments that could be more harder or tougher, or maybe you need to process it, or maybe it's a learning moment or a growth moment. So I think life is all about going through a roller coaster of happiness, where the spikes in happiness help you to take through maybe some harder bits, which are also always there. And if you talk about sustainable happiness, it is how you can create balance throughout that roller coaster, meaning how you can make sure those peaks aren't too high, because there's no point in that. Might even make you addictive to things. So, you don't want those peaks to be too high, and you don't want those valleys, you might say, too low. So it's finding the balance there, and that is not something that is or isn't, it is continuous work. And luckily, if you get older, you get wiser and handier at managing yourself and keeping that balance going. So, if you ask me what's happiness, it is the way I can maintain balance throughout all those different emotions that I'm faced with.
I like that. Yeah, very very mature way also looking it, and really that balance between the two elements, which kind of already says. I also always ask what contributes to your happiness, and you already mentioned a lot of that. So
Yeah.
that's what I call the yellow factor inward. So
Mm.
I would ask you, what is then your yellow factor outward? How do you contribute to other people happiness?
That's a nice question. So, how do I create happiness with other people? That's the question.
Yes,
And I'm looking at one of those leaves, one of those elements, right?
yes, ideally.
Yes. Um, well, it's not one. I hope.
You can pick
So
more.
I can pick more. I can pick more. So
You
I
say
think
your
first
main
of
one.
all, well, I'm training on facilitation. I see it as a pure form of leadership. I think at the moment that somebody facilitates a group to get the best out of themselves together in co creation, that is leadership. And I think the basis of that is empathy. So,
Mm,
is leadership out of empathy? It's a form of servant leadership. So, I think by being able to empathize with other people, I'm able to respond better to them in a more relevant way, in a more valuable way. I'm able to interact with them in a way that suits them better. So I think I could provide happiness by empathizing. Um, I also think, and I guess that's just something that I like doing. And sometimes I believe I could be good at it. It's articulating purpose and meaning, which is obviously why I've written the book, because it felt nice to do that. And when words start flowing and they start matching into concepts, that's something that that gratifies me. That's nice. But that also means like I'm I can do that. So I can articulate a proper purpose for people, not just a fluffy high level one, but something that connects to them emotionally. And I think that also comes from my brand and marketing background. It's where you always look for a hook, like why would this matter to people? Like this purpose all seems great, a great North Star, but how can we make it land and make it real and make it touch people because they can personify with it. It touches upon some of maybe their sore spots or their weaknesses, or maybe their concerns or fears. So or maybe also what drives their happiness or motivation. So articulating purpose, I think that is a big one. um, yeah, I can't choose all of them because it will take up all the time. I'll just choose one more, and it's also linked to facilitation, and that's autonomy. Like I love empowering people, and I'll put it differently. I love to find ways to put people in their power, and that sometimes means more because empowering is also one of those buzzwords. But putting them in their power means um, triggering sides of them that are part of their talents, their natural gifts, how they feel good, what they do naturally. So putting them in a state where they can just be the best of what they can be, and that is autonomy in the end. So yeah, I think those are already three good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and having read your book and followed your course, I can really resonate. That's also how I felt that you contributed a lot to my
Oh,
own happiness. So it's like really, yeah, spot on. And I'd say probably I would add in there the health part, because or at least I know that's also a very big focus for
yeah.
you. And I have to say, I was really, really impressed. So I'm going to show actually this one. I loved your dedication that you made on the book, where you spot on. I was like, knew that the part 3 of your book, which is also about health and managing your state,
Yeah.
would resonate with me. But before going there, I think, so 2 questions. One is also, what's your definition of empathy? Because
Yeah.
like I see a lot of discussion lately about what is empathy, and also a lot of confusion. And I'm like, okay, what is empathy for Alwin? Tell us.
Yeah. Well, before I explain that, I have to first explain maybe another part of myself. My father was a professor, and that means that a very academic, highly intelligent, but very academic. And I always had a tension in our relationship where I wanted to break free from something that academics impose because they're all about science, research, models. Things are true or they're not. And I like that zone of how are you, how can you make sure you're true? Okay, you've got some research, and or how can you make sure you're right? You have got some research, and it's valid and all that stuff, but I'm sure there's some research that might contradict it, or how do you 100% know that you're sure? So there's always this tension field with the academic side, and why I'm telling that is because it's the same way I look at things like empathy, though it is very much influenced by that. Um, a lot of people explain empathy in a way like personifying with somebody, stepping in their shoes, feeling what they feel. But it doesn't explain anything about the state that we're in. Like, what is that then? I step in somebody's shoes. How should I feel? Because I tend to maybe think rationally about it. Maybe I'm just projecting my emotions. So it's kind of hard to grasp it in such a high level explanation. And that is when I reach out to more science. So I actually, although of that tension field that I was talking about, I actually like science sometimes because it does give you proper handles to understand something. So when it's about those kind of topics, I kind of like to look at science a bit. And then some other topics, I just don't like science to restrict and have only one truth. But in this part on empathy, it has a lot to do with your state and even the state of your nervous system. And your vagal nerve plays an incredibly important role there. Your vagal nerve, your longest brain nerve in your body, connecting your brainstem with your gut and your heart, being it a two-way information highway, what people sometimes forget. So it's not your brain telling stuff, but it's also your heart and your gut telling stuff to your brain, which is called intuition, and also your sense for if you should be fearful or not about something. So gut feeling, heart feeling, and that vagal nerve is incredible, and there has been a lot written about it lately. a lot of attention on it lately. So that vagal nerve is important for your parasympathetic response in your autonomic nervous system. Those are all fancy words. It just means when you get into your relaxed state, not your stressed state, a lot is done by your vagal nerve. Like, for example, lowering your heart rate and your respiratory rate, but also activating acetylcholine, which is one of the first known neurotransmitters in your body. And acetylcholine helps you to also be more open to social connection. It actually stimulates lateral thinking. It stimulates your memory, and it gets you in a more empathic state, open to people. And I just like to say that empathy is getting in a state to be able to open up to people.
Mhm.
And you can describe that state in all kinds of ways, saying it's personifying, stepping in the shoes of. There are different ways of empathy, and I define it like that, that, and that. But if you want to look at the real truth, it is just a state that you get in, and that is open enough to connect. And we all have that state inherently because we are really wired socially with that vagal nerve. We are social beings. And it has also been shown in research that loneliness is one of the biggest killers in human life. So that clearly shows that we are wired to connect socially. It also made us survive. It made us the dominant species because we were able to connect and communicate in such a way that we conquered any challenge we had. Well, not there's still a lot of them, and I hope we connect in a smarter way together to solve the big issues of this age. But just to say, we are wired to connect and feel empathy. But you're not if you're stressed, if you're fearful, if you need to defend yourself, if you need to survive. Your system is built in a way that if it's about self-preservation, you just become focused on survival. You become focused on survival, and the only thing that matters at that point is how can you immediately act. And that has nothing to do with being social. So if you're in a state of stress and survival, your system is created, and with system I mean body and mind, that you will tap from your memory how you could immediately react and what is logical, what is the next step, and should you run. And you have a single-minded view, which is often comes from the ego, which is logical. It's self-preservation. So
And
yeah.
survival and not thriving, right?
And survival, not right, is just immediate surviving, right? It's not
Yeah.
dying. That's where that system comes from. If you're attacked so that just means, in summary, empathy for me is getting in an empathic state. That is what empathy is. And what follows is obviously the consequence. So, making sure that you get in such a sweet spot between your sympathetic and parasympathetic response, making sure that you open up to people, but also having the right biological state for that relaxed state. That is a moment of empathy. So saying that you empathize while you're stressed, yeah, that's ridiculous. You're not doing that. It's just words.
And that state is critical for the interaction with people, but it's also the basis for what you call facilitative leadership.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more what is facilitative leadership and how did captains of leadership came to be?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's not my quote, but leadership has been seen as the ability to turn a vision into reality. And captains of leadership is a reference to leadership and being a captain of that form of leadership by facilitation. Because a facilitator, actually, in that moment of co creation, tries to get the best out of that group to turn something that's on the design table, something that's in their minds, into something that is actionable and could become reality. And that is a form of leadership, which is why I like to call facilitation facilitative leadership. And the cool thing is that it's available to anybody. You don't have to get a title, you don't have to be promoted or anything. Anybody could say, I'm facilitating this co creative moment. And then how does empathy come in? Well, obviously, if you want to get the best out of people, and if you want to create the best journey, the best narrative for them to, from their starting point, get to the right output from their creative moment so they can take action on it and they can change something, you need to be able to sense them, sense the space, and feel out if what you are providing them as an activity and where the conversation is going and how everybody's taking part and where they're building on self, feel out whether that's moving in the right direction and facilitate it. And facilitation could mean a lot of stuff, right? It's creating the right setting, is asking the right questions, is triggering the right thought processes, is putting the right people together, or maybe breaking all that stuff you do with facilitation. When you're facilitating, you're just based on a lot of intuition, trying to get the best out of that moment for them. And it is such an honest and strong form of servant leadership, which is why I'm so passionate about it. Is, you know, you're taking leadership out of a context of an organization with layers and hierarchy, maybe, and you're putting it into a moment that has a start and an end where people just need to connect to such a level that something beautiful comes out. And that shows real leadership if you're able to facilitate that. I would even say that any leader in the C-level position, if you really want to know whether you are building intrinsic motivation and people follow you intuitively because of how you interact with them and who you are, and maybe to what extent you can empathize and lead them. If you want to see whether they will follow your lead without you directing them, go and facilitate a workshop. Step off the pedestal and just step in a room and get your team there and be a facilitator. And you can't give any answers. You can't direct them in any way. You have to just provide the environment, the space in such a way that they find their own answers. And they're so psyched about it. They're so motivated about it that they just want to take action on those things. Then you're leading. And then if you can apply that back in your job when you're in the big office, then you're an awesome leader. So I'm a bit biased, obviously.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, you just give them a very big task. So I'm like, let's give them some tools. And I'm like, in your book, you quickly talk about, you at length talk about the 3 steps to use to facilitate, which are guide, conduct, and catalyze. My challenge for you is, can you give us a hint about each of them in like 30 seconds to 1 minute each?
Yes, I'll do that. So, guide is how can you strategize about bringing a group of people from point A to the end point, meaning knowing who they are or somewhat knowing what their challenges in the context and what will be the right flow to let them land on an output that they all believe in and they want to execute upon. That's guiding. That's providing structure. You create trust with that. They think you're the right person in the right place to lead them in this moment. Conducting is based upon where attention goes, energy flows. It's when you have plants in your house, then you'll know if you give them compliments, you take care of them, give them a lot of attention, they grow. It's the same in a conversation. If you are able to direct the attention of all the participants on blind spots, on each other's important points, then they're going to unlock new interpretations. If you allow for conversations to go about the same thing, maybe one dominant person keeps repeating the same stuff, that's where all the energy goes, that's what grows. That's what the conversation is. So conducting is making sure you have them build on each other by directing their attention, and where their attention goes, that's what grows in the conversation, leads to great interpretation. That is conducting. Catalyzing is from the start of your workshop, fueling their sense of ownership. So that means you can't give answers. You can't even write on their Post-its. You can't even stick the Post-its on their board. Often it's even better to have them recap what they've just decided. Do all the stuff to have them own it. It's their creation. It's not yours. They're not doing it for you. You are just facilitating. Fueling that sense of ownership throughout builds towards an ending point where they want to act upon it because it's theirs. It's their baby. It's so great. It also is a form of coaching, making sure that you give people small compliments in a subtle way about what they just brought. That increases dopamine, and dopamine is the motivational neurotransmitter, meaning if they feel good about something they just did, they'll do more of that. So you give subtle compliments, say, oh, Mark, wow, that's a great point. Marie, what you going to do with that? Or Frank, is that what you expected? How does that relate to what you just said? Oh, what can we do with this now to make it better? Those kind of things, that also helps to create ownership. So catalyzing is about ownership. And there you have it. Guide, conduct, catalyze, put that facilitation trinity together is not rocket science, but it's something that you can do lifelong learning for to get good at guiding, conducting, and catalyzing.
And then because I love that you mentioned also that it's the three elements of mind, hands, and heart
Yes, yes, yes.
related to it. But it's also
Doing, thinking, and yeah, believing. Yeah. Sorry
and
to
it's
interrupt.
also something that you have to keep indeed on practicing it and also on normalizing. So, and I'm thinking when I'm saying normalizing, there is something that for me very much resonated when I did your training, and that gave me also the autonomy part, was you normalized for me something which I thought made me a bad facilitator, or that made me think I'm not cut it for facilitating, and that is the facilitation hangover. Can you tell us
Ah,
more about the facilitation hangover? Because I probably many people also have it, and might be something that makes them feel, you know what, I can do this. So, what is the facilitation hangover?
well, the facilitator's hangover, and that is something I also only got clear on. I'm just gonna grab my charger here as well, Roger, because I don't want to miss. Don't want to miss out this conversation. Just gonna pull it in here so I don't drop out. Sorry about that intermezzo. But the facilitator's hangover is something peculiar. Whenever I had a full day of facilitation or a couple of days of facilitation, then not immediately afterwards, but the day after, I would feel exhausted. And I would always think, oh, what happened? Like, what did I only did a workshop? What's this? And when I talked to a lot of people about it, it seemed that they had the same thing. So whenever you do a pretty, intense workshop, you get this type of hangover afterwards. It feels like it's, the intensity of your brain work there, how attentive you are and how you're into it. You don't feel it immediately, like when you're in a sports game, but afterwards, the day after, it's like, oof. And that's the facilitator's hangover. And that's normal. Seems to be normal. If you do that intense type of facilitation, then you might get a hangover afterwards. And yeah, everybody has to find their own rituals on how to then, yeah, deal with that hangover.
Yeah, which is then also why in the book and in the training you share that the role of self-awareness, vulnerability, because also like, sharing some things that we think we are the only one having that issue, but actually not, and managing our own state
Yeah.
are the key ingredients for effective facilitation. Any
Yeah.
other key ingredients that I may forgetting, and any poison instead that if you put it into the recipe will just kill your effective facilitation.
Yeah. Um, absolutely. So yeah, there you sum it up beautifully. There you go. So, but hey, can I ask a question? So, if you have had experienced a facilitator's hangover, do you have any rituals, or what do you do, or how do you deal with it, or you just live through it and at the day after you feel better again? So
Yeah, so at the beginning, I just lived through it. The other, what I learned also is to manage my state beforehand by
yes.
doing much more meditation, much more laughter yoga, all the things that keep my level
Mhm.
higher. What I also notice sometimes it really helps me to break it down. So instead of doing a full day of facilitation, to do small hours, especially with the online world, that
Yeah.
really helped to do smaller blocks. And the other one is also work in the nature, what you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
That is what really helps me as well.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah.
any poison instead, any ingredients that we should definitely not put in the effective facilitation. Uh,
So with poison, you mean anything that you should definitely not do to do
yes,
effectively? Yeah. Well, try to first of all make sure that you walk into your space as a facilitator in an open and relaxed way. So a good preparation, that's important, obviously. So make sure you don't have to do stuff last minute or when people are coming into the space, and also make sure that you have framed that moment of co-creation properly. And with that, I mean you have really thought through that purpose. You have really thought through how people connect to that emotionally, why it matters to them. You've also talked with stakeholders that are not in the space, but they're actually very relevant, have an important stake in the purpose of that workshop, and you've talked with them to understand what's their view, what's their idea of success. And you've also investigated properly, who will I have in the room. You might not know them at all, and it's the first time you meet them, but then still you could have just seen what's their backgrounds, what's their roles, where did they come from, where have they worked before, what kind of feedback or input did you get on about them in general and about the way they work or their style. And then also what are they used to doing, and then think about what should the output be. Like what is it that this group might need to then take action on it? And then that type of framing, that also prepares you nicely to do such a co-creative moment and avoid a lot of poison, meaning maybe not working towards a proper deliverable that then can be executed upon, or people get lost on what you really want them to do exactly, or you have created a kind of flow that doesn't resonate well with them, or you haven't thought through what really matters to them, and you're not able to touch upon what matters to them often to keep them emotionally fueled throughout the workshop. And of course, yeah, but that's a I'm not so sure if that's so groundbreaking, but related to manage your state, you can't be stressed, but you also, there are three things from Zen Buddhism that are very relevant here. And it has been, been quoted or used by Eckhart Tolle and I believe by multiple, gurus or important people or thought leaders. It's no judgments, no resistance, and no attachments. Like, you can't be a good facilitator if you judge personalities. Anybody can be whoever they are. They can all be perfect contributions to that co-creation. Even the person that's super critical, there's a big value there as well at the right moment in time. And by judging them, you're handicapping yourself, but because it's cute, it turns all your attention towards that person. And you lose the sense, you lose the being in touch with everybody else in the room. So no judgment, no resistance, meaning if things go in a different way than you planned, then that's how it should go. It's their party, so you need to facilitate. So adapt towards their party. And no attachment is, yeah, if you come in with already hoping that it will have that kind of output, like you're the topic expert and they also assigned you as a facilitator, where you should probably say, let's get an external one so I can fully contribute my thoughts. Or if you say, I will facilitate it, then put on that hat and completely forget about your expertise and not be attached, because you will obviously ask trigger questions and build the activities in such a way that it will go towards what you want it to be. And you might not be that happy if it doesn't. So no judgment, no resistance, no attachment applies to this as well.
And I'm laughing now because I'm especially like, it's especially resonating with me right now, the no attachment to all the questions that I still wanted to ask you. And I'm like, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but I felt like there were so many things that I want to ask you. And I'm like, I just felt I followed the flow. So there was definitely no resistance. But now I'm like, okay, now I have to let go of all the additional questions I want to ask.
What's the one you want to ask the most?
So I'm thinking, before we get into the final rapid fire question, the final 5 minutes, I have one final question. So let's see if you can answer it in 1 minute or two, which is, what do you think gets in the way of people and companies adopting more facilitative leadership? Because if we look at there isn't real facilitative leadership going on as much as we would like yet. So what gets in the way?
Wow, but you want to answer? You want to have me answer that in 1 minute? Because it's a really, really good question you're asking, and a lot of stuff gets in the way also, depending on the organizational culture, the type of company, obviously. So it's hard to say this one thing applies to all of them. Well, what I have noticed is anybody who sees a good facilitation happening is immediately convinced that that has a lot more benefits for the organization than that they imagined before. So you can talk about facilitation, you can describe it, and everybody would say, yeah, of course, yeah. So, or what is facilitation? Oh, it's okay, it's leading a workshop. Yeah, okay, it doesn't seem that important. But if they would see a really good facilitator, it would be like, oh, wow, that's a different output here. That is leading to a different outcome. Everybody's so intrinsically motivated. Whoa, this is a completely different level of co-creation. So I think I would conclude that a lot of organizations haven't seen it yet. They're just not aware.
Yeah.
It's not on their agenda. And the organizations that have, those are the ones that already have natural good facilitators. And maybe they're from their design community, or maybe they're just from people that are natural could be people that are natural leaders, but they've seen it and they're aware. So that might be a big difference.
Okay, now we are at the very final questions then. So, and I'm even going to skip the fire question. So just fill in the blanks. To me, happiness contribution means
Making other people happy.
that's an easy way out. So then what can you still do as an individual leader to increase your happiness contribution inwards and outwards?
Whoa. And that's rapid fire questions. Oh, what can I still do? Um, well, I think one thing outwards is helping more and more people to become facilitative leaders. That's one thing I could do. Inwards, it is keeping my own inner judge in tune. Like everybody has it, but keep managing that and keep doing the work myself of sometimes doing stuff like meditation or other kind of practices that takes me out of being me at a regular time, just to not be too much me or being too much my identity. And that practice, I think well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people struggle with that, to keep that going, because life comes in between, and just taking your me time and stepping out of life, that's hard to make time for that. So I think inwards, that is what I should try and keep doing. And sometimes easy, sometimes I really struggle with finding the time and the focus.
I guess it's very relatable for us all indeed. So what is your final golden nugget that you would like to share with the audience?
The final golden nugget. Um, a rapid fire question. That's not a rapid fire question. The final golden nugget. What I want to bring along to the audience. There is no one truth in life. Everything changes continuously, and they're only perspectives. If you would have a different parent, or would have been born in a different country, or there would be any other variable in your life different, you would already have a different perspective. So there is no one truth. Let go of that. Facilitation is about a celebration of different perspectives. It's a celebration of life, because you open up to anything that could be any perspective without enforcing your own. So if you feel that you have all the answers, there is no one answer. There is none. There is just creation. And what you've created is redundant very quickly, because life changes and evolves.
Look at that! What an amazing, way full of wisdom, final golden nugget you put through. Fantastic, just on the spot.
Well, that's a nice reaction.
Amazing,
So,
amazing. Really beautiful. So where can people reach or find you if they want to know more, or even
yeah.
follow your courses on facilitative leadership?
Yeah. So we've got a website. We're going to revamp it and make it a bit more clear what our proposition is. At the moment, there's a lot around the book, but we have such a good program of training that we have to put it more in the picture. And we also, we help with facilitation. We coach on facilitation. We even try to make ourselves available for just quick one-to-ones for people who would like that to soundboard. So I would probably refer to the website at this moment. It's the www.captainsofleadership.com. And if you just want to get inspired often, I try to write an article every week. I have managed so far almost. Sometimes it's every 2 weeks, but I try to do every week, just to make sure that I keep structuring all the thoughts around facilitation and I keep inspiring. So every week there is some new article, and it's about how do you earn trust. It's about how do you manage your energy? Like, should you eat sugary stuff and coffee and all those things if you are throughout the day facilitating workshops or you're participating? What does that do with your energy? Or it's about, execution is the hardest thing in an organization, right? I mean, with that, I mean delivery. So an article around how can you facilitate to make sure that people get to action, actually do stuff, make change instead of only talking about it. So those kind of more controversial topics, I try to pour in articles every week. And to see them coming out, it's best to connect with my LinkedIn or follow my LinkedIn profile. That's where I post them.
And we will have the links also in the show notes so people can find you there. Then
Great.
Thank you so much, Alwin. So much more to talk about. So we might have to do a second episode at some point later in the year, but thank you.
We'd love to. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening to our podcast today. This was all for today's episode, and this is the Happiness Contribution Show. I am Rosaria, and I'm committed to bring more happiness into the world, one customer and one employee at a time, empowering companies to achieve growth, productivity, and profits, cultivating happiness. If I can be of help or support for you, for your company, with my advisory, keynotes, sessions, or training programs, I would love to hear from you. So get in touch. In the meantime, keep following our podcast, taking care of your own well-being, and connecting and radiating from the heart. Thank you, and until the next episode. This was the Happiness Contribution Show, available on YouTube as webcast and on your favorite channels as podcast. If you like the show, we would appreciate if you share it with one person that may benefit from it too. Subscribe to our channel and tune in for the next episode. You can find all the episodes and discover more happiness contribution tips on our website, happinesscontribution.com. That's all for today. Stay happy and healthy, and nurture happiness contribution.